Alright, so after a week of playing the closed beta test for Duet Night Abyss, I thought I'll just give a quick review, an honest review regarding Duet Night Abyss, especially my first impressions regarding the game. So this is largely going to be unscripted. I do have like bullet points next to me, but this is going to be for the most part unscripted. So I'll try my best to keep this spoiler free. There will be allusions to the fact that certain things happen in the story because that's what I need to talk about, but for the most part I'll try and keep this spoiler free. So yeah, so generally, as a general review, I think that so far the experience of Duet Night Abyss has been really good. I think that it's been a good experience, but there's a caveat to that, because there is a need for refinement. A lot of things about this game need refining. Things as simple as like maybe there's like repeating voice lines for things that have already happened, right? Especially for the quests, right? Not this one, for the combat, for the commissions. When it comes to certain things like the defense, right? Snow will just repeat the same voice lines, which is alright, but like it's just the exact same voice line even though it should be slightly different. There's also things like there's a lack of voice acting, especially with the second part of the closed beta test for the story mode. This could be because I'm playing with the JP subs, with the JP dubs rather, which I find to be miles better than the English dub. Probably just like a case of me being used to it, but still, I think like just technique wise, I think the JP dub is way better. But yeah, there is a lot of things that this game needs refining, especially with the fact that the models aren't exactly up to par with a lot of other gacha games out there, especially with the competitors, which is Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, and all of those, right? So there is a need for refinement, which is fine, right? Which is fine. I don't expect that. It is also important that this is a closed beta test, so we can't exactly expect this to be perfect. I'm not expecting this to be perfect, but as an experience for a closed beta test, I think that this is genuinely good. It's just a bit rough around the edges. And I think if they really want this to be something good in the future for the official release, it has to be refined. Again, it's a closed beta test. Even Wuthering Waves' closed beta test was not perfect and was still rough around the edges, so it makes sense. But I really do hope to see some refinement in the future versions. Now let's talk about the story. So far about the story, I think it's the main selling point. The main selling point of this game is that it has a solid story. So the story has two protagonists. I can't show them right now because they're not playable for some reason. I don't know why they're not playable, but that's the thing. Actually, I can show one of them. In a really roundabout manner, I can show one of them. So she is one of them. So the story has two protagonists. So there are two POVs in the story. One is a fox hunter. A fox hunter as in PHOX hunter, right? So this is our fox hunter over here. You can choose whether it's a guy or girl, it doesn't really matter. And that is someone from outside of the Hyperborean Empire, which is the tyrannical empire of the main bad guy of this game. And then the other is a soldier from the Hyperborean Empire. So that's someone who works within the Hyperborean Empire. So then we have two POVs, one from outside of the Hyperborean Empire and one from inside. So yeah, we get this very nice dual reality where we see someone new looking in, and then someone new looking in, and then someone from within looking out, sort of deal. And yeah, and it is genuinely a very good thing to have, because as we've come to know, the world is never truly black and white, it's always gray. So it is really cool that we have two perspectives from seeing the same entity, right? But sometimes some of those things might not be good, sometimes it might not be bad. So it is a very, very good distinction to have. So the story in the beta test, I already completed the story. So you want to look at my playthrough of the story, you can go ahead and look at that through my main channel, or this channel. I didn't edit anything down. But yeah, so the story is divided into 3 parts. We have the prologue, where we see our fox hunter. We see our fox hunter being separated from her best friend, who she basically treats as family. So they get separated, and then we have the first chapter. The first chapter is basically the fox hunter going through Ice Lake, which is this city right here, and she's basically discovering the world for the very first time without her best friend, without Barry guiding her. Because so far throughout the entire story, we've had Barry, she's had Barry guiding her throughout her life, and this is her first time being apart from that, and she's trying to get information to find Barry. The second chapter, so actually to roll back, so the chapters with the fox hunter are called chapter Noctoyager. It's spelled, actually I can probably just display it here. So it is spelled over here. So chapter Noctoyager. So that's the chapter with the fox hunter, and then the chapters with the soldier are called chapter Twilight. So the first part of the game is, I would say it's very emotional. It's a lot more emotional, and it basically sort of gets us to know more about the setting through an everyday person's life, because we're discovering the world alongside of our main character, alongside of the fox hunter, right? And then after this chapter, we have our chapter with the soldier from the Hyperborn Empire, which is chapter Twilight. It's a bit more political, so there you do get sort of an understanding of the political world around the Hyperborn Empire, which is sort of an interesting thing, because here we have emotion, we have lore, and then after that we have politics, and it is slightly more action-packed than this chapter, than the Noctoyer chapter. Okay, and eventually throughout the not in the closed beta test, but eventually the 2 protagonists will meet. Okay, in both we play as an amnesiac, so we have to discover what things sort of mean alongside of our main characters, which is fine. It's an easy way to sort of introduce terms, right? You introduce terms with our main character, and then we discover those terms alongside them, right? So when we first arrive in Ice Lake, we are thrust into basically some random unknown world, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it makes sense in context, and the world sort of, the way that the story sort of paces itself, it sort of unveils like more of the world as it goes on, but it sort of makes it so that it's like sort of an everyday occurrence, right? So one good scene I can talk about is when basically there's racism happening, and our protagonist instantly wants to help the people being condemned, but then Psyche just stops her. She's like, don't do it, right? Don't do it. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to get yourself killed. And then throughout everyone else, right? Everyone else in the square just doesn't do anything. They just stare, and then they just back off. Psyche herself is like, well, let's just back off, right? So you can tell that from the start, from that moment, you can tell that this is sort of an everyday occurrence, and the fact that we have to discover that through this is great. So the pacing at which we discover things, I think, is really, really good. So I think for all intents and purposes, the story is really, really well done. Pacing wise for the story, I think it really lets us to know like the characters, and really lets us get attached to them. There are instances where I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. So for example, there's a part with Outsider, which is some dog guy, wolf guy, where he trains us. I'm like, this is so stupid. I don't really need this for the story. This is more like a side quest type of deal. So there are bits of like that. one thing in particular that I do have to give props for the story for is that it doesn't shy away from death. In the first few minutes where our main character is in Ice Lake, a kid straight up gets shot. Like, he is dead. Like, the kid is dead. So that is a very, very good setting. That is a very good scene. Sure, you know what? Yeah. So that is a very good part of the story that allows you to really understand what kind of story you're getting into and what kind of world you're getting into. And then more characters, both minor side and major characters, die. So it does not shy away from death. I think it really helps sell the fact that this is a war-torn setting, right? And it really punctuates some of the themes of this game, which are racism, corruption, right? There's a sort of longing here, and there's a limited time, right? There's a limited time, especially to things like life, to bonds. I think those themes are really, 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 like, they really come across because there's this idea that any character can die, and I think this story does it so well. Right? So it's also important to note that this story doesn't necessarily have like any big, like, complex, like, plot twists or whatever, right? Like, throughout the story, like, throughout my playthrough, I could tell, like, I basically tell you guys, like, oh yeah, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, right? Like, nothing really catches me off guard. But it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing because their execution has been phenomenal, right? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey or whatever. And I think they execute the journey really well. I will say that as far as chapter 1s of gacha games, I think this is probably one of the best ones out there. Even for Fate Grand Order, which is universally hailed as like a really, really, really good, like a good gacha game with a good story, right? It took until chapter 6. It took until the Singularity 6, which is Camelot, for things to really get going. Just for context, there's the prologue, there's then the first Singularity, second Singularity, third, fourth, fifth, and then finally the sixth. So it basically took 7 chapters for Fate Grand Order to really, really, really be good. This got good in chapter 1, right? And here, take it as you will, but I think I don't think I've ever cried at chapter 1 of a gacha before. This managed to get me to cry. So take that as you will. Because you know some of the games that I cry at, right? I cried at Klee. I cried at some JRPG games, including To the Moon, right? So the fact that a gacha game of all games is able to elicit that sort of response to me, I think is very, very interesting, right? But there are things that I don't like. Psyche's introduction, especially to our main character, right? She basically trips over herself and then lands in the fox hunter's arms, which I'm like, that's so anime, that's so cliche, that's so stupid. But it does tie into her character later on. I just don't think that's that good of an introduction because they added like a slow-mo to it, which I think was really stupid. And then Outsider's introduction, so the wolf guy's introduction, I think we trusted him way too easily, because then he was like, oh yeah, just come alone with me, like come alone to my house, and then yeah, don't bring anyone else, don't bring any weapons and all that stuff, and then we just go along with him, and we're like, huh? He stole your stuff like moments ago, are we just supposed to like ignore that? And I guess we are. So that is a part where I'm like, okay, Outsider, like I think we trusted Outsider a bit too easily. And then the Hellfire Trial, which is in chapter Twilight, I don't think it made any sense, because like it was supposed to be like hallucinogenics, but then like we're suddenly like in the trial mod combat where we have to fight against the Hellfire for some reason, which I'm like, why? I thought this was supposed to be like a trial. Why are you suddenly like fighting us? Like I thought you were supposed to like get information out of us. Why are you suddenly fighting us? So I think that was like a really weird part. So there are parts of the story that I think were really not weird. I think they were off. But something else I wanted to point out, that's like 20 things I wanted to point out, is that the dialogue options do matter. Kind of. So throughout the story, you will have to select dialogue options, right? As you do with like games like Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, and all that stuff. And Fate Grand Order, obviously. But this game does it differently because, well, depending on what you select, you actually gain certain traits. So if you actually go to your map, and you open your map, open this section, you can see there's Chaos, Benefit, Morality, Wisdom, Empathy. So you will gain certain trait points depending on the dialogue option that you select. And depending on how much those traits like sort of are, right? Depending on how high those stats are, certain side quests will be unlocked. So it doesn't really affect the main story, but it is cool to see sort of like dialogue having an impact on the general game, even if it is something as small as like side quests. Because as far as I know, no other gacha games really have like dialogue that affects the game. So it is really cool. So overall, I think the story has been really cool. I think the story is the main selling point of this game. But yeah, that's that. Yeah, it's not. I think besides like some odd moments here and there, I think the story has been phenomenal. Now the characters. So I think for the most part the characters have been really good. I think the characters have been really solid. I'm not going to do like an analysis on like each and every single one of them because I think that's just going to take too long, right? But I do think all of them receive enough screen time to sort of like get the player to understand them, like at the very least as a character. And another thing I want to point out is that not all of the characters like our main character, which I think is great. If you've ever played this genre of game before, especially with like gacha games or open world gacha games, right? Genshin and Wuthering Waves, those two are the most guilty at having the side characters immediately be fond of the main character, which is really stupid, right? It sort of degrades them as characters because they're like they immediately trust the main character for no given reason. Here, each character has their own motivations, and based on those motivations, you'll sort of see how they react to our main character. So some of them will straight up be like, I'm gonna kill you, right? And you're like, okay then. Or some of them will prove to be a bit more cold based on like certain circumstances that force them, that sort of make them cold towards you, right? So all of them do feel like actual characters with their own motivations. They don't revolve around our main character just because they're inherently the main character, right? They have their own sort of ideals, they have their own motivations, they have their own dreams, right? And more than that, the dialogue does not feel like a script, which is very important because so often than not, like even when I'm speaking, right, it's very hard for a dialogue to sound like dialogue, especially if it's scripted, right? It's very easy for you to be like, oh yeah, I can just say things and then it won't sound scripted. But there's a certain cadence to natural sounding like things, and even in text form you can make that out, right? So it is important to note that the dialogue sounds like actual dialogue. It sounds like people talking to each other rather than it being like a scripted out conversation, which I think a lot of gacha games do sort of suffer through. So having just there's a plant up here, what the heck? But anyways, having just the characters sound like actual characters helps a lot with making them feel like actual characters, if that makes sense, right? But there is one character that I want to point out. One character in particular that I want to hate, because I will publicly hate you. Hate her. Sorry, not hate you, I'm so sorry. Snow. Snow is this little creature over here, this gremlin over here. This creature over here is called Snow, right? She serves absolutely no purpose. She, from the moment she's introduced to the moment that we last see her, she serves absolutely no purpose. Whether or not she's in the story or out of the story, it changes nothing, right? There's no reason why Snow should even exist, right? I don't know why she's even here, because when Snow is first introduced, right, we're actually alongside her, Camilla, right? So when we were first introduced to Snow in the story, she's alongside Camilla, which is fine. But then it's like, why would we need Snow if Camilla's there? Because there's no reason for Snow to be there if Camilla can already, like, talk to us, right? And then, like, she also, like, overreacts to the most, like, stupid things, or, like, she overreacts to a lot of different things, which I think actually takes away from a lot of impactful moments. Like, in one particular instance, she starts crying at a character's death, except we as a group barely knew them, sorry, and in fact, we were actually antagonistic towards them as a character up until the moment of their death. So it just makes no sense for her to cry. It makes it feel so undeserved and feels like an overreaction, and sort of takes away from the emotional moment. So the only character that I think has not been done justice, or I think is, like, just overall not a good character, is Snow. Because Snow serves no purpose. She's a nothing burger of a character besides just being annoying. So, yeah. Another thing that I want to go towards in terms of characters is design. Okay, fine. I can't go to the armory while I'm sitting down. Okay, but design-wise, I don't think any of them really stand out. Like, besides, like, maybe the Fox Hunter. The Fox Hunter looks great. Berenica looks fine. Barry looks fine, right? Psyche looks fine. Right, so I think those three characters look fine. Except that they don't stand out in terms of, like, what they don't really stand out. Like, we have her. That was not on purpose. We have her. We have Oliver, Hellfire, Randy, Maggie, Margie, actually, Rebecca. So, as you can see, like, I don't think any of them are necessarily bad designs. I just don't think that they stand out. Because in an oversaturated market of, like, gacha games, right, none of these necessarily, like, stand out. They don't necessarily have, like, a design language in particular that make them stand out, right? Also, as you can probably see, like, their models are fine. Like, their models are fine, right? They're not particularly great. They're not particularly bad either. Like, they're just fine. They're passable, right? But again, in an oversaturated market, you want the models to be good, especially when your competitor is things like Wuthering Waves, which have, like, they have some of the most expressive character models out there, and they have a lot of details as well, right? And also, take a look at the character art, right? This is beautiful, right? This is so good. This is so nice, right? So especially if you have such a nice character art, and then you have this, like, it's not, like, I don't think the models are bad, but it's not phenomenal either. They're nothing like extremely good either, right? So that is something that I do want to point out as well. So I hope that the character models are things that they're gonna sort of ramp up. Also, something that my friend pointed out is that there were no jiggle physics, which I didn't really bother to care because it's never really been my thing. But apparently there's like no jiggle physics, which I'm like, okay, that's fine. But because if we look at Hellfire, there's absolutely no jiggle physics. There's like cloak physics, there's tail physics, but there's no jiggle physics in particular, which again I'm fine with, right? But apparently it looks natural to like a degree. Like apparently it's too stiff. My friend was like, God, they're too stiff, it looks unnatural. I'm like, chill. Chill. So yeah, I assume that they'll add in the jiggle physics later, because they have confirmed that they're still working on the models. Like, even the protagonist models aren't ready yet, so that is something that you do have to take into account. Also, speaking of the protagonist, you can't play as the Fox Hunter. You cannot play as them. You can't play as her. You cannot play as the Fox Hunter, which is like, why? Right? And can only play as a soldier in certain parts of Chapter Twilight. And it makes no sense. The game literally tells you that the Fox Hunter fought in certain sections of the game, right? They also have the model ready to some degree, right? Because there's a certain section where you have the Fox Hunter walk towards another character, right? So it makes no sense that you can't play as the Fox Hunter. I don't understand why you can't play as the Fox Hunter, right? Also, like, I think as far as character designs go, like, she probably looks one of the best. So I don't understand why they're not letting us play as the Fox Hunter. So yeah, in Chapter Twilight you can also fight as the soldier. So they have the model ready, right? They can also fight, right? Because in games like in Arknights or the protagonist from Fate, right? The master from Fate, those characters cannot fight. That's why we can't play as them. It makes sense why we can't play as them, right? They'll get instantly annihilated. But here, our Fox Hunter can fight. So it makes no sense as to why we can't fight as them. We can't play as them, right? So that's something that I do want to point out in terms of like character, because it's so bizarre that we can't play as them, and I think that they're one of the best designs. So I really hope that we can play as them at the full release. So yeah. Now let's go over our gacha system. Our gacha system, which is called the retrace system. The retrace system over here, which is an hourglass. So what the retrace system is that you can basically summon anyone from the past that you've met, or people from the future that you have yet to meet. And basically, to do any 10 pull, you need 1,600, or that would be 160 for each pull, right? Which is the same as Weathering Waves, but there's a couple of differences, right? The couple of differences is that they keep track of your pity, which is really cool. So if you go here, you can see your pity in the detail section, which is cool. But yeah, so the pity is at the character pity. The character pity is at 90, and then the weapon pity is at 80. Okay, but the character pity is actually separated into 2 tabs. So before I actually wrote this, there were actually 2 tabs. The first tab, right, is temporary, and basically what this just allowed you to do was that you can actually roll for the featured character, and they will always be guaranteed within the pity, right? So instead of being a 50%, it'll be 100%. So this basically guarantees that you will have at least 1 copy of a character, assuming that you hit pity, which I think is a really, really good system. And then after that temporary banner is gone, yeah, you'll basically get your standard gacha banner type of deal. So when you hit 90 rolls, then you'll have a 50% chance of getting the featured character. If you don't get them, then you get them at the next 90 rolls, right? Or you can get them in between. It doesn't really matter, right? So that is our pity system. And then next we have the weapon banners, which don't have a 50-50. It's always going to be an 100% chance. So yeah. It is also important to note that they have the same premium currency as the character banner, so you don't have to split them up like you do with Wuthering Waves. So you can sort of just invest all your currency in this one thing. So yeah. But circling back to the retrace system, this part will have spoilers. So if you're concerned about story spoilers, just skip the rest of this review. But this is something that I do have to give them props for, because remember what I said at the start of the Gacha System review, right? The retrace system means that you can summon anyone from the past that you've met, or from the future that you have yet to meet. It says meet or met, right? They make that distinct language, they distinctly use that language when the retrace system is introduced to you, because the characters don't have to be alive for the retrace system to work, right? It doesn't say that the characters have to be alive for this system to work, so you can summon dead characters, which means that this gives the writers a lot more flexibility on who they can kill in the story. Simply because in the system, it's built in. You're literally meant to summon people across time, like anyone that you've met across time, you can summon. So it really doesn't matter if they're dead or alive, right? So it's sort of like the servant summoning system from Fate, where the characters can die or are already dead, but the system is about time. It's about distorting time. It's about bringing people you've met or you've yet to meet. And so yeah, the writers can be a bit more liberal on who they can choose to pick off, which I think plays into the fact that they can kill anyone off in the story. No one is safe, and I think that's really, really, really cool. So yeah. Actually, let me do a couple of rolls first. Okay, I got Barry, Randy, and there we go. Okay. And of course here, the pity updates, so 12 more, and then I can get a guaranteed for this one, right? Now let's go over the combat. The combat, so the combat, as you can see, is warframey, right? On the bottom right, on the bottom left over here, you'll have your level, you have your base health, and then you'll have your shield, right? Your health doesn't restore unless you have an ability for it, or an enemy drops a healing potion. Your shield will naturally regen over time. There's also sanity, which is this bar over here, which is basically just like a gauge for you to use your weapons. The cost is over here, right? 19, and then there's 10. So it's your energy bar for your ultimates and your skills. This bar will regenerate over time, and I believe sometimes it actually regenerates if you kill enemies. It really depends on what they drop, of course. There's also no stamina system, so you can just sort of climb walls at your own leisure, right? So you can just climb walls, right? But there's also a double jump, like so, right? And then there's also a helix jump, which is just a crouch and then a jump, right? So you get something like this. Right, so something like that. Okay, so that's generally it for movements. And of course you have your melee weapon, and then you have your gun, right? You have your ranged weapon, which is fine, right? So those weapons can actually be they don't only have to be limited to one character. Every character there, right, every character that you have, you can actually share weapons. And so, yeah, it's cool. There's also things known as demon wedges, which you can apply to both your characters. You can apply it to both your characters and your weapons. So demon wedges are just like slight buffs to each characters, which are cool, right? So here you get 15% shield and 15% health and all that stuff. There's no RNG involved. So basically what you get here is what you get is what you see. And then when you level up, that sort of thing the effect will increase, right? And you can share those demon wedges with the with different characters as well. So the weapons and demon wedges can be shared across different characters, which is really cool. You can also get demon wedges from the shop over here. These are good demon wedges. You can also endlessly grind demon wedges from these two quests over here, from these three quests, rather, and they actually don't cost energy. So you can endlessly grind for demon wedges to endlessly buff your characters. But of course, there is a limit to how to like the there is a limit. There is a cost limit to the demon wedges, which is cool, right? Also, I forgot to mention, but there is no fall damage. So if you fall from like anywhere up there and then down here, you won't take any damage, which is really cool. So that's that's that for the characters. If you continuously hit enemies, right? If you continuously hit enemies with your weapon, with your melee weapon, you will build up a combo attack, and using that combo attack, so it'll go from D to S, you'll be able to unleash a heavy attack, a charged attack, which basically just is that. Yeah, so that's the heavy attack. I think that's bugged. Let's ignore that for a second. There we go. So that is our heavy attack, right? And based on your combo, the damage will scale up. Okay. But if you use your ranged weapon while you're building up a combo, it basically cancels out that combo. So that's it for combos. And then there's also additional effects like smash attacks, which is just jump, smash. And then there's things like break bars. So if you have your enemy basically has like a white bar underneath of their health. If you break it, then you can walk up to them, you can hit them with an ultimate attack, right? You can only play as one character, so right now I'm playing as Psyche, but you can also summon 2 other characters to help you out. So I can summon Barry and I can summon Rebecca, right? It doesn't really matter. They can only equip 1 weapon each, and they're basically just AI, right? So those are called sigils. So basically you can have a party of 3, but you can only play as 1 character. So that's it for combat. But there are things about the combat that is kind of clunky, especially with the dodge. I don't think there's any reason for me to really use the dodge, I think. I don't even think it gives you iframes. What the heck? But yeah, I don't think it gives you iframes. Because sometimes I actually get stuck on my enemies when I dodge. So like I'm like, this is not good. Because I just can't move anywhere, right? So most of the time I actually use the dash as more of a sprint than I should be for like using it to dodge stuff, which you don't really want. But when you play as the soldier in Chapter Twilight, if you manage to dodge at good times, right, time actually slows down. So if you actually check in combat, protagonist's perfect dodge when facing strong enemies, dodging at the last moment before an attack, and before an attack hits, will slow nearby enemies for a brief period, right? I think that's such a better implementation of like what dodges should be, right? Rather than like just this, because this does not work well. This is so clunky. Like the fact that you get caught on enemies is so not great. But I think if it's slowed down like time, I think that would have been so much better, right? If it was like a universal thing. The wall jump is also clunky to some degree, sometimes. So yeah, so if you want to reach an enemy out of range and you have to climb up to them, it will also be kind of clunky as well. And then we have things like Genimon, which is Z. If they appear. Oh, wait, no, they did not appear. But basically, Genimon are basically Pokemon, right? They're basically Pokemon. You can catch them around the world for whatever reason. You can sort of see them over here, right? These things. So they're basically like support things. I just think it's really stupid. It's so random. It's like everything, like, it's so bizarre. Like, it's so random. Like, why there's suddenly like a Pokemon thing, and then like they don't even serve anything like lore wise. They're just there. So like I don't understand why there's suddenly like animals there. So it's just really random. So I don't understand why they have that. But yeah. So like I think like everything in this game, the combat has a good base, but it could really use some refinement, especially with the dodge, right? Because or else the movement just feels kind of clunky. Next up we have the UI. So for the most part it is good. I just have some issues with it. So it's simple and clean, except that it does make some things hard to understand. So let's take a look at the map. Like, it's just all blocks of gray and white and black. It's all monochromatic, right? With like simplified shapes, right? They're not necessarily like representative of whatever. So it does make things to kind of hard to understand. The dialogue as well is all in black and white. So you'll usually see like the dialogue over here. But because like our main character is white, like our main character has like the main color of white, it makes like there's no good contrast. It makes the text sometimes really hard to see. It's just overall not great, I find. So in terms of like, I think readability, that's definitely a thing as well. So I think if they added like a slightly transparent text box or like a black outline around the words, I think that would make things a lot easier to read. And also a lot of dialogue that happens when you're playing around, right, happens over here in the left side. So actually let me show you in terms of thing. Where was it? I think it should be this, right? Yeah, it should be this, if I remember correctly. So I'll show you what I mean by, because that does become disruptive. Having the text on the left side does become disruptive because it also shows the profile picture of the characters. So puzzle, right? So look, Snow's face, Snow's big head. So Snow's big head straight up hides information, right? It's kind of annoying. It's also very annoying because, especially if you're trying to read and play at the same time, especially you're playing another language, right? It makes it really hard to sort of focus on both, right? And the fact that Snow's face straight up hides, like, it's like some of the profile pictures straight up hide, like some of the aspects of the game, make it sort of really not the best decision, right? So yeah, UI can be improved, I think, especially if it comes to things like understanding things, right? Because that is, I think, a huge part of what makes a game good, right? What makes a game understandable to its audience. So understanding things, UI is important, right? And then let's go over some miscellaneous things. Music. the music of this game is phenomenal, right? I'll insert a section where we're gonna listen to the title screen music, but there's also sections where it's like this. Like every area has its own specific music, which I think, damn, it's like really good music. So I'll shut up and then you can hear it. So yeah, I really like the music. I think the music is phenomenal, right? I think Wuthering Waves had some good music, but I don't think any of it really stuck, really called out to me. Like I think the moment, I think you can hear this in my playthrough, but the moment I walked into this area, right? The moment I walked into this area, I was like, oh, I like this music. Like legitimately, it was one of the first things I called out, which I think is like wow, right? So the fact that it instantly called out to me, I think was really good. So chapter 1 of music, solid. Music of chapter 1, sorry, rather. Also, one thing that I forgot to mention about weapons is that you can actually forge weapons. So if we go back to our sanctuary over here, which has a shortcut, which I think is really cool. So if we go over here, right, we can craft a whole bunch of weapons, including 5-star weapons, right? Which is really, really cool. So we can craft a whole bunch of stuff, and we can craft demon wedges, and yeah, we can just craft so many other things. Weapon holder. I don't know why we need a weapon holder. Okay, yeah. But yeah, so we can craft a whole bunch of things. So yeah, that's the forging system. And now let's go over the mission variety, right? Which are the commissions. So if you're used to playing things like Wuthering Waves or Genshin Impact, usually those missions can be sort of resolved to kill things faster, right? That's basically the end goal of killing of like grinding things, right? So there's really not much variety in terms of how those games actually work, but here there's actually a whole bunch of different things that you can do to grind for the resources that you need. So if you want to get like coins, you have to activate like excavators. If you want to get like your character to have like more XP, you have to like kill enemies and then sustain yourself with a serum, right? Termination, kill as many enemies, right? There's no time limit for that. Expulsion is you have to, was it this one? I don't remember. God, there's also another one where you had to like disarm a bomb. It can also kill 3 guards at the same time, right? Escort missions, defense, you have to defend against a central thing. So there's a whole bunch of mission varieties, which I think is really, really cool. So yeah, even if you have to grind things out, I think there's enough variety where you don't feel sort of bored because there is variation. Exploration wise, it is important to note this is a semi-open world game, so it's not going to be fully open world, right? There are some places that you can't get to. I encountered one over here, so if you feel like exploring this world, you can't. There's barriers, right? Which is fine. And you also can't swim, so if you try and go in the waters, you will die instantly, right? But that's fine, right? And like I said in my general review of the game, this place feels really barren. Like I already set the crowd density to high, but there's no one here. Like it doesn't feel like a city. It feels very not lived in. Like even for these alleyways, there's absolutely no one, right? So that is something about the world that I think could be improved. No, if it's not open world, it's fine. I don't really care. Because there's already enough open world games, so I don't think it really matters if there's a semi-open world game. It doesn't really matter to me. There are trials, so sort of like a running trial, a range shooting trial in the world. So yeah, so you can find those in the world as well. But yeah, overall, the world is fine. The exploration is fine. I just don't really think it's an integral part of everything. Oh, can I actually go? Oh, it's blocked, of course. So yeah, that's it for exploration. Customization wise, so you can add stuff to your character. Look, you can add a sprout to your character. You can add things like maybe like a ribbon, a bow rather, something there, a bird, right? You can even add like things attached to here. Is that a Wuwa? Is that a Wuwa reference? A book, right? And then, yeah, you can also add things like this, right? So there is customization. You can also remove things that your main character also that your character also comes with. So if we look at our character, Rebecca by default comes with this this translucent cloak thing, but you can also remove it if you want. So you go here, you can remove it, which I don't know why you would, because then she looks really plain, but you can remove it if you want. For Barry as well, you can remove her cloak as well if you want, but I like having flowy things, so I kept it on. You can also dye your weapons. So in case that you like things being color coordinated, you can dye your weapons, right? So you can have like things that maybe be blue, maybe have it be a different color, right? That can be red or whatever, right? Doesn't really matter. Here, there. Now it fits a bit more Barry's color, right? So there is like, oh, what the heck is that? Ew. So you can dye your weapons again. So there are customization options, which is something that other gacha games don't necessarily give you, besides like skins. So I do appreciate having that that to add on, because look, Psyche has a little sprout on her head. It's really cute. So customization, highly appreciated, even though it's not necessary. And then endgame content is basically just doing side quests. So if you want, you can do like side quests over here. Once you're done your main quest, you can do side quests. You can also just grind for your character, so do all the commissions, right? And then you can also do chaos echoes, which nocturnal echoes, not chaos echoes. I don't know why I called them chaos echoes, but nocturnal echoes, which are basically just their equivalent to Wuthering Waves' holograms, and you can attempt them 50 times a week. I don't know who would play this for so many times, but you can basically fight bosses 50 times a week, which is insane, right? But I will say that the rewards are slightly maybe more helpful gameplay wise than holograms, because for holograms, like, you just get like some currency to spend on the shop, and that's like sort of limited as well for the rewards they can get, and maybe like 20 astrites, which is fine. But here you get like things to upgrade your demon wedges, a melee for like something for like a melee weapon, so they could forge some more stuff. So I think generally these nocturnal echoes give rewards that are more relevant to the gameplay than holograms. And then there's also events. So right now there's a Maze of Missteps, which is basically their equivalent to Wuthering Waves' Some Noir. So basically, I don't know why I did this. So basically, you get buffs. You like, yeah, it's basically a Some Noir. It's like a roguelike, right? You can fight waves of enemies. You kill the enemies. After a wave, you get a buff, and then so on, right? And there's a shop in between where you can get some stuff, and all of that stuff, right? So it's basically their equivalent to the Some Noir, which is fine, right? So yeah, those are the endgame contents, and so yeah, oof, that was a lengthy review. But yeah, honestly, I'm pretty excited for the full release, for the official release. I'm honestly really excited for the official release. I kind of have high hopes for this game. I have high hopes for this game because it's something that's different. It's same-ish but different, right? It feels familiar in terms of like maybe like Genshin Impact or like Wuthering Waves, but its format is like, the format wise I think is very similar, but it does things very differently, where it's a semi-open world, so it feels a lot less expansive, feels a lot less daunting. There's also a focus on the story, where again there's two protagonists, and you can tell that they're putting in a lot of effort into the protagonist, which is cool, into the story, which is cool. My problem with the story, which I didn't mention this in the story section, but it just came to mind, is that The story for chapter Noctoyer does not lead anywhere. That's my main problem with it. It's very emotional. I love the story. I love the characters of the story. My problem is that it doesn't really advance the Fox Hunter's goal, right? She started out in Ice Lake, right? She met some people, that's fine, right? And her goal was to get out of Ice Lake. Except she didn't go anywhere. She just stayed in the Ice Lake, and at the end of the chapter, it's just her getting knocked out, and it was just like, what? It didn't progress the plot anywhere. So I think that's one of the problems with the story so far. With chapter 1 of the Noctoyer chapter is that it accomplished nothing. Whereas with chapter Twilight, with the soldier, right? The soldier goes on a mission, right? He gets caught. He then needs to escort the prince to somewhere, right? So there is a progression in terms of where he's going, where there's a plot being pushed forward. For the Fox Hunter, there was basically no progression, right? But yeah, overall, yeah, I think once they iron everything out, once they refine everything, I think that it can be something that's pretty cool. I think that this game can be something special. I am scared though, because Duet Night Abyss will have to compete in already pretty saturated market. So if they want to stand out, they will have to really, really, really iron out their things extremely well, right? That, or they will have to expand on what really makes them unique to set themselves apart. So far, their combat is basically just Warframe. So if they refine their combat system, that can work as well. Or they can refine on the story. Because again, I love the story. I'm just worried, right? I'm just worried that they'll drag it out. If they drag out the story, I think that's going to be the biggest killer of this game. As well, not necessarily the story, but just the reunion between Barry, between her best friend, and the Fox Hunter, right? With Genshin, part of the reason why it became sort of frustrating for Genshin was that the meeting between Ether and Lumen was so dragged out, right? Ether went from place to place to place, and right, each place was supposed to be like a new revelation, right, about like where to find his sister. Except that in where he was supposed to get answers, what he got was, oh yeah, go to another person, right? Go to this other guy. And then it became like this loop of, oh yeah, go to this other person, go to this other person. It became very, very frustrating. It became so dragged out, and the plot did not progress whatsoever. We basically just solved problems, and our character's goal was basically forgotten, right? And then when Ether finally met Lumen, Lumen was like, alright, finish your story, and then we'll meet. And then it was like, what? What? After all this time? You're serious? So, what became the main point of Genshin's story, which is the reunion, sort of became like an afterthought, and then the exploration aspect became the main story. It was so bizarre, right? So I really hope that this game does not take that path. Because here's the thing. The reunion does not have to be the main goal of the story, right? It can be one of the goals, one of the directions of the story, but it doesn't have to be where the journey ends, right? Genshin Impact's main goal became the reunion, which I think was its biggest problem, because they made the reunion the ultimate goal, whereas a reunion doesn't necessarily have to be the main goal, especially for the story. The reunion can just be one of the goals. It can be a step towards another goal, or maybe it can just be a step along the way of the larger story, right? Like maybe after they rescue Barry, they can go fight the Empire and fight the corruption, right? The reunion does not have to be dragged out and doesn't have to be the main part of the story, right? So it really doesn't matter where they take the story, as long as they don't drag it out, I think. Which I think they might be because the first chapter the first chapter didn't have any sort of progress for the Fox Hunter, which does make me kind of worried. But I'm going to remain hopeful because, again, this is just a closed beta test, so they can always change things up. So all in all, I think with a bit of polishing, and if they play their cards right in terms of like maybe pacing and all that stuff, I think Duet Night Abyss can be something that's really, really good. But that will take time, that will take proper management, that will take like actual good implementation of ideas, that will take refinement and all that stuff. But yeah, I hope they manage to pull it off. So I'm pretty hopeful of this game being good, right? It's already pretty good. Again, they have all the bases set down. They just need to polish everything down. But yeah, fingers crossed that they polish everything out and that'll be good. But yeah, I think that about wraps up for my honest review of Duet Night Abyss. I know this has been a very, very long, very, very long review, but I think I want to cover up every base possible, just so that everyone gets a good idea of what's actually happening in the game. But yeah. Again, I could be biased. I could absolutely be biased. I am. But yeah, I think... yeah, I have high hopes for this game. I genuinely do. They live up to my hopes and expectations. And so, yeah, I think that wraps it up for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me. This has been our, my review of Duet Night Abyss. I hope you guys genuinely do give it a try when it comes out, because I think that the story is actually phenomenal. But yeah. I think that about wraps it up. Hope you guys have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when and where you are. And see you guys next time. Bye bye. See you and take care. Bye.